Bracing for impact and preparing for the effects of the government shutdown showing up in paychecks and pantries in our communities. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Coming up, a year after Milton made landfall and impacted lives on our coast, we're looking at what's changed since in those communities and why October brings unique challenges during the Atlantic hurricane season. Also, the area's only juried art festival featuring Florida-based creators is taking over the streets of Winter Park. But first, when the federal government shuts down because lawmakers fail to pass a budget in time, some of the impacts are immediate, while others take a bit longer to be felt. The longer the shutdown, the deeper the impacts. We're well into week 2. Central Floridians who have dealt with shutdowns before are getting ready because they know firsthand what's coming if no deal is reached. Joseph Groover is an Army veteran who joined the TSA in Orlando in 2019. As an essential employee, he's still showing up for work at Orlando International Airport. This week, those TSA employees will receive a partial paycheck for work done before the shutdown, but he says the next pay period will be the most difficult.
It really doesn't feel like I'm essential if you're essentially making me do free labor.
When will your first missed paycheck be?
So the first full missed paycheck should be around October 24th. The one that is coming up is going to be a partial, depending on how many days you had off this last 2 weeks. So you could get anywhere from 75% of a paycheck to as low as about half.
We all, yourself included, we all have bills to pay. A lot of people live paycheck to paycheck. How does missing a paycheck affect your life?
It adds a lot of stress and a lot of undue stress in already a stressful time. While they give out this nice little letter that says, hey, we're in a government shutdown, this employee is not getting paid, lenders and lien holders don't have to accept that.
Joseph, what do you hear from your colleagues?
The constant questions of, when do you think this is going to be over? Are we going to get paid? What are we going to do? What if I can't afford to get gas to come to work? What do I do? Am I going to get in trouble if I have to call out? Things like that.
Do you notice a difference in your team's morale?
Oh, it is in the ground. Probably even underground at this point. As a officer, you have so much you have to think about as far as your job goes, and this is just adding lots of undue stress in the back of your mind when you're supposed to be focused on your job. Instead, you're worried about, what am I going to get paid? And things like that.
So in some other states, we've heard about hundreds of TSA workers calling out sick. Is that something you're seeing here or you could see happen here?
So as of right now, staffing at Orlando seems pretty good from what I've seen. Me and my colleagues are showing up to work because we know we have a job to do. But that's probably only going to last realistically until you're financially unable to come to work. As in, like, not being able to put gas in your car. I'm fortunate. I live about 10 minutes away from the airport. Some of my colleagues live an hour and a half away.
Orlando International is the busiest airport in the state. Will passengers notice a difference because of the impacts of the federal government shutdown?
As of right now, probably not. Not until we go and hit that 0 paycheck week, which hopefully it's resolved before then. But once people aren't financially able to get into work, you will probably notice an increase in wait times and definitely lower staff levels.
In recent years, there's a lot of talk about potential government shutdowns if deals aren't reached. Usually it's avoided, though clearly not always. Have you ever thought about leaving the TSA because of the reality of the shutdowns or just the threats of knowing there could be another shutdown?
Me personally, no. I know hopefully we will eventually get paid. There's always that back pay aspect. I just hope that we actually do get the back pay and nothing happens to where they're like, hey, sorry about that. We can't give you back pay this time.
Are you receiving any kind of guidance from the federal government now?
Me personally, no. Maybe the upper management for TSA is.
How about with your union?
With our union, we're just trying to keep morale up as high as we can and telling people if they're able to show up to work. And we're trying to help people out when we are able to from a union standpoint.
We hear a lot of blaming right now. Blame put on Republicans and Democrats for this shutdown. I want to know from you, what conversations do you think we should be having right now?
Well, I know there's a lot of infighting between both sides. I think they should take a look at the people who the government has deemed essential and make sure at least they get paid.
And Joseph, I think there are a lot of well-intentioned travelers who want to help you and the TSA officers working right now, but actually policy doesn't allow you to accept personal gifts. So what can people do now that would help?
They can get a hold of their representatives and talk to them, be like, hey, you guys need to talk to your colleagues up on the Hill and get this ball rolling, because there's a lot of people being affected, more than they probably think.
Joseph Groover works for the TSA in Orlando and is first vice president of the AFGE Local 556 labor union. When the pay suddenly stops, the demand for food assistance goes up. A prolonged government shutdown can impact nutrition programs. SNAP for low-income families or WIC for mothers, pregnant women, and their children can run out of funding or be disrupted by benefits processing delays. So instead of heading to the grocery store, some people will have to turn to their local food bank. Second Harvest Food Bank of Central Florida distributes to more than 870 feeding partners across Brevard, Lake, Marion, Orange, Osceola, Seminole, and Volusia counties. Even before the shutdown, a government program they relied on for food was ended early, and they lost several tractor-trailer loads of food worth over $1 million. Now they're preparing for impacts of the federal funding lapse. I met Greg Higgerson, the Chief Development Officer at Second Harvest Food Bank of Central Florida, at their hub in Orlando. It's a massive warehouse, walking through aisle after aisle. There are towering stacks of food from floor to ceiling. There are pallets of canned goods and dry staples. One door leads to a large walk-in freezer, another to refrigerated foods. Dozens of volunteers are in motion everywhere you look, sorting donations and loading boxes in this busy hub.
One of the things that's hard to see when you are in the warehouse is how quickly the food moves through. What you're looking at right now is about 2 million pounds of product, but I can tell you that if it stopped coming in that end of the building and kept going out the other end at our current rate of distribution, we would be empty in about 2 weeks. That's how quickly it moves through.
This isn't your first government shutdown. As it continues, what are you looking for? What are you preparing for?
We're trying to plan for another layer of need laid onto Central Florida. Right now we know that about 1 in 7 of our neighbors needs help with food. In our 7 counties, that's roughly 500,000 people. If we have workers that have their paychecks disrupted, and that could happen as soon as next week. And so we're trying to be prepared for that. Our partner feeding programs across Central Florida are getting ready for that, I think. We've had some experience with this in the past, and we know that it takes 2 or 3 weeks for the real disruption to be felt. But once it does, it can be rough for people, for their families. So when we look at the kinds of employees that might be getting their paychecks disrupted here in the coming weeks, obviously with tourism here in Central Florida, we know that TSA at the airport could be affected. Back in 2018, when we had a shutdown, we were able to do a mobile food distribution out there. As TSA employees got off of their shift, they had to come out through the employee parking lot, and we had a mobile drop distribution set up there so that if they needed food, they could pick it up and take it home. Certainly we would consider doing something like that again. We also are over on the Space Coast, so who knows what's going to happen with NASA potentially and the Space Force Base and things like that. So we're trying to process all of that and make sure that we're ready to reach out to that specific population when we can.
Are you supporting families who depend on federal programs like SNAP or WIC?
Yeah, a lot of the people who use our partner feeding program network also get supplemental nutrition assistance program or SNAP, WIC, and other government programs just to get the food that they need. As far as we know, those benefits are going to be distributed through the end of October on their normal distribution schedules. Beyond that, it's difficult to say.
Then what? What does that mean for you?
Yeah, that could be a whole nother layer of need here in Central Florida that would unfortunately kind of snowball, I think, as prolonged shutdown continues.
Did you learn any lessons from previous shutdowns?
You know, the main lesson that we learned during these shutdowns is that just there's so much uncertainty. You can plan to a degree, but you can't really tell when it's going to wrap up, what the actual consequences are going to be in the meantime. But we have learned that it really does pick up from a pain standpoint the further along you get into it. So we're really, really hoping that our lawmakers and our faith communities and our individuals in the community, all of us can stand up together and hopefully get an end to this.
How does that uncertainty impact the people you're helping? Not knowing if those benefits will continue.
Yeah, uncertainty when it comes to something as basic as how am I going to put food on the table for my kids can be an incredible stressor on top of other stressors that people have, worried about their job situations, worried about sick family member or something else. There's just so many things going on out there right now that are causing people to really take stock and try and figure out how they're going to make it. The thing I don't think people realize is that we're putting 300,000 meals a day out the door to our partner feeding programs, and it's still not enough. So the idea that we can fully meet the need with our mission here in Central Florida, not really. We need a lot of different things working together. Private sector, public sector, generous individuals. Everybody has to come together to get people what they need.
Greg, I'm wondering how that makes you feel. You guys are helping hundreds of thousands of people every day, and it's still not enough.
Yeah, it can feel a little haunting sometimes. You have to focus on the positive. We have an incredible mission here that's helping a lot of people. If we had more resources, we could do more. Fortunately, we have a lot of partners here in Central Florida who understand that. But when we have disaster situations, and I guess you could look at the shutdown being more or less a man-made disaster, we have to be ready for those too. We are the emergency food supply for Central Florida, and with the help of the community, we have to step up.
Greg Higgerson is the Chief Development Officer at Second Harvest Food Bank of Central Florida. We want to hear your voice and share your stories. If you're a federal worker, a contractor, or dealing with the impacts of the government shutdown, send an email to engage@cfpublic.org or send us a talkback on the free Central Florida Public Media app so we can share your experiences on air. There's more ahead on Engage. Activity happening now in the tropics is a reminder we are still in hurricane season. Next, we explore how and why the season shifts in October and hear from Florida Shore's residents still dealing with the fallout from Milton that made landfall 1 year ago today. This is Engage on Central Florida Public Media.
There's a lot going on in space, from efforts to land astronauts on the moon
and liftoff of Artemis 1
to answering the age-old question, are we alone in the universe?
Wouldn't you want to know if there was life on another planet?
Are we there yet? Explores space exploration every Tuesday at 6:30 here on Central Florida Public Media.
This is Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Today marks 1 year since Hurricane Milton made landfall in Florida, October 9th, 2024. If you're asking yourself, was that storm really that bad? Yes, it was for some Central Floridians. It approached the state as a Category 5 before it weakened to a 3 at landfall, crossed over Florida toward the Atlantic, spawning deadly tornadoes, and dumped more than a foot of rain in Volusia County that flooded homes and overwhelmed stormwater systems. Local governments passed emergency moratoriums on development to keep drainage issues from getting worse. Since then, Florida lawmakers passed Senate Bill 180 to speed up hurricane recovery by making it easier to rebuild faster. However, the law blocks local governments from changing their own growth and development plans, and opponents say that local leaders can't protect residents from their own unique issues like flooding or dated stormwater systems. Florida Shore's resident Kimberly Penny lost everything to flooding twice and says the pauses on development are needed to figure out how to fix the infrastructure. She shares how she's still recovering from Hurricane Milton today.
For Hurricane Milton, we waited till the very last minute, but we did leave. We went just a couple towns over, stayed there where it was safer from flooding. We stayed in contact with my neighbor who was able to show us pictures and send us videos. And we woke up that morning to a picture of our backyard completely underwater, which told us the house was going to be underwater. She was able to look in one of the windows and get a picture, and we could see inside the kitchen was filled with water. So we knew we had water in the house. We did end up getting about 4 inches max for Milton.
Was anything salvageable?
So because we lost everything we owned in Ian, this time we were able to prep a little better. Well, prep at all because I didn't prep for Ian. So we were able to prep a little better. Bigger things got ruined, but the smaller things didn't. So we put everything up on the beds. We put everything up on the couches. We emptied the kitchen cabinets, that kind of thing. What we didn't do was lift the couch up, lift the bed up. So that stuff still got wet, but it did save all of our things, all our clothes, all our shoes, all of our important things that we couldn't take with us.
Going into this conversation, I was thinking that I'd be talking to you about Milton as if it was an uncharacteristic event that you reflect on, but I'm hearing that flooding is not something new to you that you're dealing with.
I have owned this home for 18 years, and I never saw water come anywhere near my home, near my street. I never even had flood insurance until Ian, and we woke up at like 3 a.m. and had a couple foot of water in our home already, and we had to be rescued by police.
Have you thought about moving?
Hard to do. It's hard to sell this home because it's flooded twice. On top of that, I am a full-time caregiver to a terminal child. I have a daughter that is terminal with Sanfilippo syndrome. So I work from home full-time for a health insurance company who's amazing, and I am her full-time caregiver. So I can't work anymore to make any more money to sell and buy another house. So I can't sell this house. One, because nobody's going to buy it. And two, if I did, I could buy another one.
You've been very outspoken about needing a development pause. Can you talk to me about what do you see in your neighborhood that worries you? Why do you feel that way?
Well, I mean, we currently have a moratorium that's not being followed because of what the governor signed. For example, my house keeps flooding, and we don't need anything that's going to create more water around here. And they just approved the people across the street for me to put in a pool. Makes no sense. If they're going to take out dirt and put in a concrete wall where nothing's going to absorb water, it's going to push the water to the places around the home, which will be mine.
Just to make sure I'm being accurate, you're talking about Senate Bill 180, limiting local control.
Yes.
Do you feel like those state leaders are listening to communities like yours?
No.
What would you like to see happen? What would real change look like for you so you feel safe in your home?
Yeah. I would just like to feel safe in my home. I think the city is doing a phenomenal job now. I think they're working harder than they've worked for years. I don't think that. I know that. There was a lot of not listening to the citizens for a long time. I mean, for example, since Ian, I've been begging. I have emails going back 3 years, begging them to come and clean these swales out, begging them to come and clean the retention pond 2 houses away from me, begging them to do things. And they kept telling me that I don't know what I'm talking about and I'm wrong and it's not going to help with the water flow. They came out last week and they did some laser measuring of the swales and my yard and everything else. My home is lower than the road, which is not good. It should have never been built that way. But they also found that the swale was not properly leveled out so the water could drain. Today, they were out there digging and measuring with a laser and digging out my swale all the way down to the retention pond area that they also cleaned out. So they're working very hard. Finally, it took fighting and it took getting a new city manager and a couple of council people in the right positions to be able to get work done. We've had council people begging for help for me for 3 years, and they were being ignored by the city manager, the department heads. And now they're listening. The city manager himself has found resolutions to a couple of things around here and had them done right away. I think they're on the right track. It's just our systems are outdated, and until we get our storm water report back and can update our stormwater systems, I am afraid that there is no solution to the flooding for a long time.
What would you say to people or policymakers deciding whether to support or fight laws like Senate Bill 180?
I would say I'm sure there's things in that bill that are purposeful and helpful, but there are things that are not, and this is one of them. What is the point in us having a city council if they can't make their own decisions for their city that they're looking at and living in? The people above us aren't living here. They're not seeing me when I flood. They're not seeing my emails every day. They're not seeing the city council meetings where there are hundreds of people saying, help us. I think that they have to understand that the reason we have city councils is because they can't be here all the time. And they took away all of the city council's control. So for me, I think they have to realize that they've put councils in place for a reason, and then they just took the whole thing away. They have to give that back.
Has this impacted how you feel every hurricane season? And we're in October now, which is considered the peak of the season.
Oh yeah, I have a stack of bright red totes at my front door. And everyone that comes in says, "Are you moving?" And I say, "No, we keep them right there for in case of hurricane during hurricane season." Everybody gets a tote or two and they put it in their room and they empty everything in their room into the totes so the totes can go up on the high things. I have to live like that. I don't have baseboards in any of my rooms. I have all of my drywall 4 inches off the ground just to hope I can save some drywall next time it floods. It's no way to live. I'm already stressed out with a terminal child that I'm taking care of. And on top of it, I have to stay stressed out 24/7 waiting for the next storm to come.
That was Florida Shore's resident Kimberly Penny. Central Florida Public Media environment reporter Molly Durig went to Volusia County to speak to another family still struggling to recover 1 year later. They're planning to cut their losses and get out of that house.
It's a mid-September day. The water flowing through Spruce Creek is lying quite low. But when heavy rains hit Volusia County, this gentle stream running through Claire Venable's backyard morphs into a terrifying sight.
When the waters start rising, they're not just sitting there stagnant, they are traveling very, very quickly.
That's what happened almost exactly 1 year ago, in the middle of the night during Hurricane Milton. Venable says she and her daughter, now a college student, almost didn't escape the floodwaters in time. When Milton hit, it was only 6 weeks after the Venables had moved back into their home after repairing damage from Hurricane Ian 2 years prior.
Ian destroyed everything. $700,000-800,000 worth of damage.
That's Claire Venable's husband, Mark. The family has lived here about 15 years, but for the past few, they say it's barely felt like home.
We've been here probably maybe 4 months in the past 3 years.
For the rest of that time, they've stayed with friends and at motels while the house is under construction. It's taken a while, partly because the place is so big, 5,600 square feet.
We are almost done. I'd say within a couple of % done.
Today, contractors are here cutting tiles for the master bathroom. But Claire says she's been doing many of the other necessary repairs.
I've managed to paint the house, all the rooms. I've put baseboard in. I've learned to use the saw, which I'm very pleased at my age that I finally achieved that skill.
The Venables say they rolled up their sleeves and got to work while waiting on their mortgage company to approve insurance payouts. A slow, circular process, Mark says.
You can't get the money to do the work until the work is at least partially done. Had we had the money, this house would have been finished and on the market in March.
The families decided they're done. Not with Volusia County, at least not yet, but with this house for certain. They're hoping to sell it.
People won't always want to come and buy a house that's flooded. We realise that, so our market's smaller.
Especially since state law now requires sellers to tell buyers about a property's flooding risk, including any past insurance claims filed for flood damage. Flooding damage costs are projected to keep rising in Florida. Climate change is partly to blame, but there's some nuance to it. Florida state climatologist David Zierden has studied all rainfall data captured at the Daytona International Airport going back to 1937. And while there's no real overall trend,
we're seeing more rainfall in the heavier events. And that's very consistent with the theory. A warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture.
Zierden says in the southeastern United States, those warming temperatures coincide with a 37% spike in rain from heavy rain events. On the Venables' sprawling 5-acre lawn, the ground is still drenched, about a week after a rainstorm hit the area.
There's lots of pooled water around, and I've noticed that this time the water hasn't gone down as quickly, which, I have to be honest, it does scare me.
Claire says in the heart of hurricane season in Volusia County, she's filled with a sense of dread.
You know, we want to be able to think about future. We want to think about what's happening in 6 months' time. But right now, we've just got to hopefully get through hurricane season unscathed.
So far, this hurricane season has been quieter than expected. Molly Durig, Central Florida Public Media.
For complete coverage of the impact of flooding on Central Florida communities and the latest on new lawsuits challenging Senate Bill 180, head to our website, cfpublic.org. October can bring changes to the Atlantic hurricane season. I talked to meteorologist Rob Eicher, an associate professor of meteorology at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, to better understand the risks of late-season storms and what made Milton so destructive.
A few things stood out to me. One, how quickly it went from nothing to one of the strongest hurricanes ever recorded. Officially, it goes down as the fourth strongest recorded in the Atlantic. Also, the kind of long, strange path that it took to get to us, and then just how much rain it produced across the area, especially considering how quickly it was moving at the time. Normally, you get the slower moving storms produce the most rain, but this was a quick mover and still produced an incredible amount of rain across Central Florida.
Why do we see, if there is a reason at all, strong storms this late in hurricane season?
Because believe it or not, the water is still really warm. I was just looking at the computer to my right here at some of the water temperatures. The Gulf of Mexico currently, right now, is looking at water temperatures between 84 and 85 degrees. And the Caribbean's got 85 to 86 degrees. So that's more than warm enough. Generally, hurricanes like anything over 80 degrees. So we're talking mid-80s, plenty warm enough for a hurricane.
When we look at, we call it fall in Florida, but it's still pretty warm outside. Not in terms of just the water temperature, but just what we feel when we walk outside. Does that cooler fall weather impact storms at all?
The short answer to your question is yes, that if a hurricane runs into drier or cooler air, and some of that air gets wrapped up into the system, that can cause it to weaken more rapidly or transition into an extratropical cyclone. But what makes October kind of unique when it comes to hurricane formation is that you're kind of in between seasons. You can still get the classic tropical cyclones that form from a tropical wave out in the middle of the Atlantic, like you would, say, in July, August, or September. But you can also get tropical cyclones that develop off of weakening, dying cold fronts that are just emerging, just starting to emerge off of the mainland U.S. and moving out into the Gulf of Mexico or into the Atlantic. So you can get kind of two sources of hurricanes all uniquely in October.
You told me about some of the characteristics of Milton that stood out to you. It makes me wonder if storms later in the hurricane season behave differently than those in the beginning? I'm thinking in terms of where they form or how they act.
They do. So typically in August or September, you tend to see more hurricanes developing out in the eastern Atlantic. Think closer to Africa, like the typical tropical wave that comes off of Africa develops into a hurricane somewhere in the eastern Atlantic. Whereas in October, and this time of year, you're more likely to see hurricanes that develop in the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico. And those, rather than traveling from east to west, as a classic hurricane might do in August or September, the ones that form in this time of year, in the later season, October and November, tend to recurve more rapidly and travel from west to east. So if you get something in the Gulf of Mexico in October, it's more likely to come across Florida, head in this direction. Whereas if you get something that develops in the Atlantic, like say Jerry, it's very difficult for that storm to reach Florida. It will most likely recurve before it gets here.
Since you brought up Jerry, is there anything else in the tropics that you're keeping your eye on or that we should be in Central Florida?
Not at the moment, no. Fortunately, it looks pretty quiet, and Jerry should stay well away from the U.S.
Have you seen a shift in hurricane season over the years? Do you see storms coming later? Is October getting busier?
There is evidence to suggest that the hurricane season is getting longer, both starting a little bit earlier in May and extending later into the fall/early winter in December. Now, there's a few reasons for that. One is simply the water is getting warmer. And that tends to help the hurricane season start earlier in May. But what seems to be actually a bigger factor for the later season into the fall is actually El Nino or La Nina. When you have a La Nina year, which is what we had this time last year, we were in the middle of a La Nina, that tends to extend the hurricane season, and you tend to see more storms later in the season, think October, November, and sometimes even into December. Now, whether or not El Nino or La Nina is occurring more frequently thanks to climate change is still a bit up for debate. But bottom line is that, yeah, there is evidence to suggest that the season is getting longer and will likely be longer. Some model projections suggest it could be as much as a month longer down the line later on this century. In other words, starts 15 days sooner in May and ends 15 days later in December.
A lot to look forward to.
Yes.
You know, a lot of people are moving to Central Florida every day. We have a lot of new residents. For them and for those who've been here a while, what's your advice to Central Floridians right now?
Don't sleep on the October and November part of the hurricane season. A lot of people think, oh, when September's done, we're over and done with. But it's certainly not unusual to see something in October. Milton was the most recent example, but go way back. I remember back in my TV days covering weather here in Central Florida, Wilma. That was October 24th and 25th. So even later than Milton was, and again, that was 20 years ago. So we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of that one. And we also had Nicole a couple of years ago that was in November. So certainly not out of the question to get something in October and November, even though we're past peak hurricane season.
Rob Eicher is an associate professor of meteorology at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach. Coming up, the only juried fine art festival is happening in Central Florida. What makes this such a unique platform for Florida artists to share their work with the community? You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts so every episode is sent right to you.
The Wrap is a podcast from Central Florida Public Media, curating the top Central Florida news stories and in-depth reporting each week. Join me, Brendan Byrne, as I bring you news headlines, deep reporting dives, and insightful conversations from the news team. A new episode of The Wrap every Friday morning. Get it wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. The 52nd Annual Winter Park Autumn Art Festival is this weekend. It's a free community event featuring nearly 200 Florida artists, live music, and an absolute plethora of food stands and trucks. The festival began in 1973, and it's grown to draw more than 150,000 attendees over 2 days. All the artists featured are from the Sunshine State.
We look for artists based in Florida. We really want to showcase all mediums, so everything from sculptors to painters to woodworking. We've got the whole gambit, and it's just very important to us to not only showcase what Winter Park has to offer, but what the highest level of art in Florida is.
That's Yvonne List de Braden, the committee chair for the Autumn Art Festival. He says the festival is a source of pride for the community.
I've been here 25 years in the Winter Park community. I grew up here. My mother is an artist, and she took a hiatus raising me and my sisters. And the moment that she was an empty nester, she started creating art again. She was a sculptor, and this was one of the first festivals that she participated in after her hiatus. And obviously that was exciting for me. And not only that, but it's always nice to see families out here enjoying the art. I have a daughter and a bunch of my friends that still live in Winter Park. We always bump into each other and are able to reconnect. And what better venue to do it with live music, art everywhere, and being able to watch your kids run around and walk through tents and just appreciate this community and the community of Florida at large.
Earning the privilege of designing the annual festival's official poster is an honor Florida artists strive for, and Winter Park-based artist Robert Ross had unsuccessfully tried to win the coveted prize 4 times. This year, he won that honor on his 5th attempt. We spoke to Robert Ross about the festival and what makes Winter Park such an attractive enclave for artists.
Every artist talks about Winter Park as being where they want to be. I like Winter Park because of the interesting things to look at. I'm a visual person, but it's a good community to be in.
Being in that community, do you find that much of your inspiration comes just from like a simple morning walk in the region?
You took the words from my mouth. My wife and I walk every morning. We have about 1.5 miles. We have about a few routes, but our favorite route is on the Rollins campus. We live nearby the campus. And so we walk there and I see lots of things. The inspiration for this year's poster, which I call Regatta, came from seeing the sailing team practicing. I talked to the coach, Dave Herbster, who was kind enough to let me take a lot of more close-up photos of one of their practice sessions, and that's where I got that image from. But just walking around, I like the Park Avenue downtown. The buildings fortunately haven't been turned into some kind of a modern, bland, square nothingness. Each building has its own character. I started out painting rural landscapes, plein air, but I kind of evolved into urban landscape. I'm really interested in the way buildings look against the background of trees and the way they look with each other. I like the spaces between buildings. I like rooftops. I like just everything about the life that I live in. I don't live on a farm, so I'm not painting cows in a meadow. I paint what I see around me. I paint city streets, backyards, houses, that type of thing. And that's what I like to look at.
So the contrast between light and shadow play a prominent role in your work. Can you talk about those spaces and the space in between shadow and light?
Well, the spaces between things have a sense of mystery and possibility. In a way, they're portals. Without getting too carried away here, it's not like a window or a door, but it is sort of like space that you can feel you can go through. It speaks of possibility, mystery to me. I've always been fascinated by it, and the way man-made structures interplay against natural things like trees and things like that.
Where is your favorite place in Winter Park where you see that?
I have a secret place. I can't tell you. But I have some views that I keep going back to again and again, and they involve the retail buildings along Park Avenue, and then right near where I live right on the canal that connects Lake Virginia with Lake Maitland, and the view I see every morning from across the parking lot where I live is the roofs of some houses that are kind of clustered together on the other side of the canal, and they look different in every different time of the day, the way the light catches those roofs. I painted in the Winter Park paint out about 5 or 6 times, and I've featured that view several times.
You were selected as this year's poster artist for the Winter Park Autumn Art Festival. Can you talk about the importance of that honor?
Well, I applied for that about 4 times before and never got the poster. A lot of people have, but this year I looked at all of their previous posters from previous years. They have a whole collection, and I started seeing some common elements, peacocks, rose gardens, fountains, and I realized that they were just as much tired of those cliches as I was, so I had to give them something different. And I realized that water is really important to this area, the lakes, the fact that people like to go out boating, kayaking, paddleboarding. And so it was an easy choice for me to make. But it's important to me because, it helps me be more visible. We artists are basically self-employed, and nobody does it for us, so we have to do what we can to be noticed. There's a lot of artists, a lot of competition, and the poster really does help a lot, and I'm very grateful to have it.
Artist Robert Ross tells us he'll be at Booth 42. Central Florida Public Media will also be out at the Winter Park Autumn Art Festival in Central Park on Saturday and Sunday, October 11th and 12th. We would love to see you there. Stop by our booth and meet our team and some of the people behind the voices you hear every day. That's all for this week's edition of Engage. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts so you never miss an episode. I'm Sharon Stone. Thank you for joining us. All Things Considered is coming up following NPR News.